We love recording FFR and bringing you our fresh feminist perspectives on pop culture each week. Please help to keep this little morsel of joy in our lives by going to patreon.com/femfreak and joining our podcast community. Women should be everywhere, like amongst and amidst the society and in which this takes place.
Like normally, like in life.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
But this is Star Wars. How dare you interject life into Star Wars? Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by someone who is far too critical of the Baby Yoda that we all love, and because she's too critical of the media we love, she might have to get banished. That would be Carolyn Pettit.
You know, if that is the price that I must pay for, I will die on this hill. No, we might talk about it. I don't actually hate Baby Yoda that much.
Yeah.
But yes,
whatever. I just love that we give you shit for being critical.
Yes, me too. Me too.
We are also joined by a very special guest, our friend and songwriter, Jonathan Mann.
This is the way.
This is the way. All right, this week we are revisiting The Mandalorian. Of course, back in November on episode 105, we were joined by Jessica Zolman to talk about the first 3 episodes of the show, but we wanted to revisit it now that the entire first season is complete. So we're going to do that.
Baby Yoda, 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 baby Yoda.
Hello, friends. We're so excited to have Jonathan Mann on this episode. He's been writing a song a day for over 11 fucking years. Like, what? That's over 4,000 songs. And he joins us today for a conversation about season 1 of The Mandalorian. And our guest today has an interesting connection with the show. Jonathan, your song, number 3974, is an ode to Baby Yoda and currently has nearly 4.9 million views on YouTube, which, by the way, is a song that you just heard. So, dude, what's this been like?
It's been wild, like back in the day of Song a Day, back in the early days, I used to have a song go viral maybe like once or twice a year, and for a while now I've been thinking like, well, I guess like songs just aren't going to go viral in the same way. Like the internet has changed and it's like it's just not the same anymore. And it seems like every time I really like have that thought in like a real way, something blows up. And that's like literally what happened with this one. And this is by far the most views I've ever gotten on a song ever.
And but speaking of how the internet has changed, which you're not wrong about that. Like, It seems from me following you on Twitter and stuff like maybe TikTok has played a pretty big role in the way that this song has gone viral.
This is true. TikTok is entirely responsible for the blow up of the song. In fact, TikTok is gonna. I'll talk about it more in the freak out because that was gonna be my freak out is TikTok because I want to go deep with you guys on TikTok because it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But like young people,
it's kids. It's like literal children. Like we're talking like 7, 8, 9 years old on TikTok, and they, when they get their hooks into a song that they really like, they just listen to it over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, like I search. I'm not. Maybe I'm revealing something about myself. But like, if you search Twitter if you put it in quotes, "Baby Yoda, Baby Yoda," which is like the lyric from the song, literally people are tweeting that like every hour on Twitter. Just tweeting lyrics from the thing. So it's like a confluence of things, right? It's like kids on TikTok love it. The song happens to be, and this is definitely not true of all of my songs, but it happens to be like a pretty good song. And then, and then it's also about Baby Yoda. Like, it's about this cultural moment of this thing.
Which a lot of your songs are influenced by contemporary events.
Very much. And so, and there's no like, I just do that when I'm particularly moved by something. Right. And Cara, I was listening to your take on the last episode, and I totally get where you're coming from with the sort of the corporate,
Yeah. I mean, like, let me say real quickly about that.
Sure.
Before, like, my issue with Baby Yoda is not at all, like, kids loving Baby Yoda and getting excited about Baby Yoda and the kind of influx
or adults.
Right. No, so my issue really, it's actually not even so much about Baby Yoda at all. Like, I think what my issue with Baby Yoda is when I see so many sites and things, like, I see, I feel like I feel like so much coverage we get of so much pop culture stuff now is totally rooted in fandom and not at all rooted in like criticism. And I think there's a difference between being a fan and being a critic. And so when I see like every site, like Polygon and like whatever, all these sites trying to just be like, Baby Yoda is the most adorbs thing ever. And like, to have like even one person say, hey, well, let's stop and talk about how Baby Yoda is this like thing that's like designed in a laboratory to evoke these feelings. Like that's, it's like people, it's like obviously people can say that and they do say that, but that kind of criticism is so... It's like the whole market doesn't even want it anymore, and I think that
doesn't make room for it.
Yeah, so I think that there is a deeper problem in the way that so many of our media sites and our sites that are designed to cover television and film now do so not at all from a critical perspective and almost entirely from a fan perspective. I think that's a problem. And for me, Baby Yoda just kind of like just puts that in my face so much that I can't ignore it. And that's where my ambivalence around Baby Yoda comes from. Like within the context of the show and, and like the adoration from young people and everything, I think it's great. Like I don't have a problem with that at all.
I want to add this though, Caro, is that I think that what you're getting at is, what am I trying to say here? I think that the criticism of Baby Yoda is rooted in capitalism, right? It is manufactured in a capitalist environment to elicit the exact emotion that we're all feeling.
Yes.
And so it feels a little like dystopian future, like everyone is going to feel this way and we're going to like dupe you all into whatever. But I think what you're getting at too here is a little bit of our criticisms and our sites that have provided criticisms and the writings that have provided these kinds of critical takes on media weren't really criticizing capitalism. They might have been more critical about the actual like content of films or movies or TV shows. But that now that there is a bigger space to talk about capitalism openly in America, at least, that I think you now want to see more of that, even though it didn't really exist before.
Right. But I mean, yes and no. I mean, because when I wrote a piece recently on Medium that did fairly well, where I cited like an old time, a critic from the New Yorker, Pauline Kael, who kind of was this old guard critic who very much had her distinctive opinions. And I just feel like, I feel like so much, like there is a larger issue too about in terms of how we engage with certainly video games, movies, television, etc., where like a particular kind of deeply subjective, deeply personal criticism is increasingly like frowned upon and ostracized in favor of like that comic that meme comic of like let people enjoy things. Like, and how that's been weaponized. Like you can't, like there's really so much pressure to just kind of fall in line and like the things that everyone else likes, and I just bristle at that, and I object to that fundamentally. Even when I like the things that everyone else likes, like I bristle at the lack of like more like. More, I want more people out there saying I don't like thing just because I think it's good to have a diversity of perspectives, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I would say too that there's just a basic internet thing of consolidation and social media taking over things and blogs dying all the time.
Yeah, and just a push to consensus and all of those things that I think are not healthy in a larger sense.
I would say, like, also, I just want to say on that take of like, struggling with loving corporate stuff, is something that I think about a lot because it is manufactured and it does elicit the response that they mean for it to. And this is and so when I'm writing a song about Baby Yoda, I am consciously at that moment like thinking to myself, man, this is really kind of dark in a way. And like, I think of it as analogous to like my love of Apple, and this is really stupid, but like I'm a total Apple fanboy, and I can at once be like a total lefty, like abolish, ICE, and there should be no borders, and private property is theft, and at the same time like idolize Apple and like drool over their products, and like I don't know how those things exist at the same time within me, but like that's where my Baby Yoda love is for me too. It's like I love Baby Yoda with all of every fiber of my being, and I think Disney is like the most evil corporation and should be and should be wiped from the face of the earth.
I think that there's something around entertainment, about mainstream entertainment, that is very different than like hating a bank. Right? That's hating like other kinds of institutions that are very rooted in our capitalist system. Where in entertainment, it's that mix of, or it's that intersection of art and business.
Yeah.
And the thing is that like art is very meaningful to us as human beings, whether it is attached to business or not. And the fact that we have these large scale, massive stories that we connect with, and these characters that we connect with, that's also rooted in a capitalist machine, makes that really complicated. And I think it will never be easy for us to work to separate those things. And I think it reminds me a lot of when I was like a young activist, and the communities that I was a part of, like hated TV, hated movies, had nothing to do with any of it. And I was like, you're missing out on like the joy and the connection that stories bring us, but also you're missing out on what everyone in the fucking world is engaging with, right? Like you're failing on two
totally
levels.
cut off from the rest of everyone else.
It's not. I think it's really, and that's why I think that there's been such a explosion of criticism, of like progressive criticism of the mainstream media, because we find so much value and meaning in seeing ourselves represented, seeing these stories, seeing these people that we connect with and identify with. But it's all created through machinery, through corporate machinery. And that's really hard to remedy. So...
But having said all of that, I want to say that Jonathan, I couldn't be more thrilled for like the success of the song.
Oh, thank you.
And I think it really is a great song, and it really is like heartwarming and sweet and wonderful to see the ways that young people, because I've seen some of like the TikToks and stuff, kind of take it and create new things with it, right? Their own little.
That's what's amazing about TikTok. 300,000 kids like making their own little music videos for that song. Like, it's crazy.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, why don't we actually get into the main segment of the week? We talked about The Mandalorian back in November, and the last episode that had aired was episode 3, The Sin, in which our mysterious hero goes all John Wick and daringly rescues the child from the clutches of the Imperial warlord who he delivered to in the first place. Yeah, it was a whole thing. Anyways, a lot has happened since then. We were all surprised to learn that some women do actually exist in the Star Wars universe. Not a lot, but some. So we wanted to revisit the show and talk about this season as a whole and where we landed when it all finished. So yeah, I may have talked about this with The Witcher, because I had the very similar feelings to The Mandalorian and The Witcher as I was watching them, where I was like, I don't really like this, but it's appealing. Like, I can't really stop. Like, yes, I have to watch it for work, but also I don't really want to stop watching it. Like, I'm curious and engaged, and they're like well enough. They're done well enough, et cetera, et cetera. And then I get to the end of both of them, and I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, I'm super invested by the time it ends. And they are both shows where I think about them, or they randomly pop in my brain occasionally. So clearly the show got its hooks into me, even though I have enormous criticisms of it, even going past the third episode.
Yeah, I mean, something that I think is really interesting just structurally about The Mandalorian, and I have mixed feelings about it myself, but is the way that it's kind of this interesting. I mean, none of the episodes are what I would call entirely "quote unquote" self-contained, in the way that some old TV shows were, but yet they very much have these encapsulated storylines, and not even just storylines, but like in a way references to sort of entire genres or motifs of storytelling. Right. So, for instance, like episode 4, Sanctuary, is totally like it's the Seven Samurai episode. Like it's we all know this. We all know this story of like warriors teaching the kind of quote unquote salt of the earth people to like fight back against, you know, some oppressive threat. And then like episode 6 is so much like it's like this interesting. It's like the sci-fi horror movie episode, right? Where you have, I mean, only the Mandalorian is the like stalking killer threat, as opposed to, you know, as opposed to it being an alien, and like our loyalties are kind of flipped, but it very much puts, you know, it's all the close, cramped corridors and like the kind of moody lighting, and And so
I'd sort of pegged that one more as like a Prison Break one, but that actually is a much better. Has both of those, but that's a much better. Sort of comp is of a sort of like space horror kind of thing. That's true.
And like personally, like for me, like episodes 7 and 8, where the storyline kind of comes back to, you know, where we were earlier, and it's like, okay, the team gets back together, and the stakes start building up in terms of like what's really going on with, you know, Baby Yoda, and you know, and all that stuff back on Navarro. Like I personally got more invested and engaged at that point when it got back to that, as opposed to what sort of felt like these one-off like side story episodes.
I think that is a question brings up some context in the contemporary way that we engage with media. Like, Mandalorian is week to week, right? Where most of our media, we get all the episodes in one go, and we get to binge them how we want. But we know that it's only 8 episodes from the beginning. It's not a 24 season, you know, arc or whatever. And so, I think that the fact that there are these standalone episodes are a little bit like, can you just fucking get to it? Like, this is kind of filler.
It was definitely surprising. It was like surprising to see such self-contained things in a modern show, because that's just not. It's not how people do it anymore. It's very old school in a way.
Yeah, there's something about it, and I feel like the production values and the writing and everything tap into this, is that even though it's a Star Wars show and it's, you know, quote unquote big budget, it does have a little bit to me of that like B tier, you know,
purposefully
kind of episodic TV vibe. And probably, you know, I'm sure to some extent purposefully.
I mean, I got the sense that it was like leaning into that. Like I got the sense that a lot of that kind of like ragtag kind of vibe is what they were going for.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of that larger structure, you know, so maybe we can get into some of the episodes specifically here. Overall, like, you know, I critiqued very heavily the lack of female characters in the first 3 episodes, as should have been done.
Yes,
I stand
absolutely.
by it.
No, it's 100%. Totally valid.
Even though I'm still getting tweets
from
sure.
Of course.
Yeah, they're still mad at me about this. But here's the thing. It didn't get great. Like it wasn't like people were like, just wait, it's coming. Cara Dune, it's coming. Cara Dune was in 3 episodes. Like, let's be honest. She was in 3 of 8 episodes. That's not even half. And the other thing you have is, so spoilers, episode 5, which is you know, the young bounty hunter coming and he's helping him out, which was not a good episode. That
was my least favorite episode, except for Amy Sedaris, who I loved.
Except for who?
Amy Sedaris, who I loved.
Yeah. So you've got Ming-Na Wen and Amy Sedaris, who appear in this episode, who are both wonderful, and they were both great. Yeah. But Amy Sedaris is a glorified babysitter.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And Fennec Shand, who's played by Ming-Na Wen, dies. So, like, you got that happening, right? In episode 4, all of a sudden you get tons of women because you have a village, and we meet Cara Dune, you meet this other woman, and that is the exception in the whole series of like the amount of women that were allowed on screen at once. I gotta say that episode reminded me a lot of Xena, and I was here for it. Like, it wasn't necessarily a good episode, not that any Xena episode was ever good, and like the pacing was off and all of that. But it was so refreshing after the last 3 episodes to like see people working together, to see camaraderie, to see women, to see a real environment in some ways. I appreciated the timing of where that appeared.
Yeah, and so the conversation around women in The Mandalorian, like there are people out there who are like, well, well, Cara Dune is a tough, woman. Like, what more do you want? Like, period, or whatever, and kind of weaponize these like little details to gloss over and to kind of obfuscate the fact that yes, but still, like, as a universe, like, I don't know how to make this succinct and clear, right? But as a universe, it is still largely, right, a universe of men in which women play these smaller roles, where as opposed to, when we talk about like wanting women on screen and it's not just like wanting the one like female character or whatever. We want to see like background characters, like the crowds, like all of this, like women should be everywhere, like amongst and amidst the society and in which this takes place.
Like normally, like in life.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
But this is Star Wars. How dare you interject life into Star Wars?
Yeah, and from that lens, like just taken as a whole, like while acknowledging that it does get better than the abysmal, first few episodes, like it still does not pass muster, by that kind of
certainly
measure.
Doesn't come close to Bechdel passing.
I don't know. It might. I don't think it does, but yeah.
So, episode 7, that was the prisoner one?
Yes.
Episode 8. Sorry, 6.
6 was the prisoner.
My computer fell asleep right as I was making this comment. Episode 6 was the prisoner one. I hated that episode the most out of all of the episodes, like aggressively. I was watching that and just raging the whole time. And part of it was, Bill Burr is not a good dude. And so him
was
being
Bill Burr
cast,
like the guy with the gun that came out of his back thing? Is that Bill Burr?
Maybe, I don't remember.
Think
he was like the main white guy that was like in the crew on the prison ship. And then you also have so this situation is a very much a Smurfette, right? Which is a crew of entirely men with one woman. And Feminist Frequency has made videos about this. Feel free to go watch them. But the female character sorry, I'm rambling. It's bad enough that it's a Smurfette in this universe where women are not included. But you also have the way that character was written was excruciatingly painful to watch. Like, just she was a Harley Quinn ripoff. Like, she was such a stereotype of like hypersexualized but totally psychotic, like blood hungry, but like just oh god,
and sexualized.
It was very frustrating in addition to everything else.
It was Tonks from the Harry Potter movies too, which was like, come on, let's give Tonks something a little bit more interesting to do.
Than
play this like really lame. Yeah, no, that episode definitely did not. It was the one that landed the least for me.
Yeah. But so the story all kind of comes together in 7 and 8, right?
Yeah.
And like, how did you feel about the arc of the story?
I'll just say that like I loved this show maybe more than you all did. Although when I saw you tweeting about it, of course, like I was a little embarrassed that I hadn't thought of that. I wasn't watching it with that eye, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty lame. And then of course it's like, well, and it's like, then I start to ask the question of like, well, why couldn't the Mandalorian just be a woman anyway? That's a question that should and could be asked. Like, there's no reason, I don't think, why that shouldn't have happened. But overall, I'll say, all that aside, like from like a Star Wars nerd from a young age kind of thing, I just love spending this kind of time in this world, and I just nerded out really hard on it, and I loved it pretty much top to bottom, aside from a few of the episodes clunkily landing. I'm really excited to see like what happens next, though. That's sort of if we want to talk about like where things ended in episode 7 and 8 and where it's going, that's to me what really got me.
Yeah, I feel like there's some really interesting, raising of the stakes toward the end. I mean, I feel like I feel like what this show does best is that kind of the kind of space western vibe, and so when it gets back into that rhythm, I think that it often works. It often, it fires on more cylinders often than when it's trying to do other things. And so, like the siege in the sort of town square, the building, like as much as I'm sort of like, there's a part of me that's like, I wish that the Star Wars show didn't love guns as much as this show really loves guns toward the end. Like, I also sort of found it more effective and engaging than a lot of what had led up to it. I think Giancarlo Esposito is, I'm always happy to see him in things. I think he could make for a very interesting villain figure. I'm a little frustrated by, so at the end, it's revealed that his character, Moff Gideon, wields the Darksaber.
Which is like a big deal, apparently, which I didn't know
Which for
about.
Star Wars nerds is like a big deal. And that to me, I'm frustrated with because I'm now at this point where like, and look, I grew up with Tolkien, I grew up loving Lord of the Rings and loving objects of power and things that have legacy and dynasty and everything. But the past few years have really, and the way that there's so much cultural conservatism around like stories that are all kind of inwardly focused and like where there's just so much potential for gatekeeping and stuff around like, well, the Darksaber, if you don't know, who wielded it originally and its history for the Mandalorian people and like this and that. And it's like, I don't want to have to keep track of a million different sources of Star Wars lore to understand like, or to be, or, to understand what's happening here.
To get the sort of depth of it. Yeah.
Like I'm just frustrated with that kind of interconnected storytelling fundamentally at this point. Like I'm not here for that. I'm here for like these characters and their stories, and I don't care about like the lore so much. But at the same time, like as far as I thought a lot of the stuff with IG-11 was interesting and good. I liked a lot of what happened in the I
loved IG-11 becoming a caretaker and that whole turn. It puts a different spin on droids in general, just how in like Rise of Skywalker, this idea that like all the stormtroopers are brainwashed babies essentially, and so killing them is morally a little much grayer than we thought. That I would say with same goes for droids if they can all be reprogrammed.
But there's also this, it's so interesting to me, the ethical question that's raised where, so IG-11 tells the Mandalorian, I am not a living thing or whatever, so that he, and I'm like, okay, are droids in Star Wars really not alive? Are we really meant to think of them that way? Or is IG-11 strategically saying that so that the Mandalorian will let him save his life, but like he has to kind of, I don't want to say dehumanize, but like devalue himself in order to do that. It's just this fascinating and kind of ethically like thorny moment.
Also, in that moment, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that IG-11 actually had to die there because.
No, it didn't feel like that.
There was like maybe like 8 stormtroopers, which I feel like they could have handled. I don't know.
But he did have to die for
the story.
Mando's character development. That his entire existence is so that we can get backstory and see his growth and his humanity come through in this environment in which it's been stripped away, right? Like he really serves as just a yes, I just said what I said.
Well, yes, I think something that made me start appreciating the show a little more than I had before, or in a different way than I had before, was like a little Twitter thread by the critic Matt Zoller cites, where when he was watching the show and he was like, oh, like it's really interesting, like the Mandalorian is protecting Baby Yoda, because Baby Yoda, in a way, represents like his own child self, right?
Oh, of course. Totally.
And like that's so obvious, and it's obviously so true. But I just hadn't really thought about it in those terms before. And like, like there is definitely something going on there.
I think that
the flashback, and the flashbacks we get to the Mandalorians childhood, or in the final few episodes, kind of emphasize that quite a bit.
So I'm with you on the lore thing, like because as much of I grew up watching the films, and I watched all of the prequels in the theater, and I watched all of the new ones in the theater, and I'm really into Star Wars, and I will say I like haven't watched all of Clone Wars, and I haven't watched all of Rebels. Like I'm not like, and I haven't read all the books. I'm not, but my perspective on the lore is like, as I watch these things and I see someone say like, oh, the Darksaber is like a big deal, I kind of honestly, like, my response to that is I kind of enjoy going and reading a Wikipedia article about it and be like, oh, interesting. And I'm like, and another aspect of that is like learning about the history between Jedis and Mandalorians, right? And like their rivalry and then how that brings a new depth to their relationship, obviously, Baby Yoda and Mando. And And then I'm like, is Baby Yoda gonna become a Mandalorian? Is the Mandalorian of the show not actually Mando, but it's actually Baby Yoda is the Mandalorian in the title of the show?
Right.
As someone who's not a hardcore Star Wars fan and has no idea what you're talking about with the lightsaber or the dark whatever the fuck you're talking about.
The Darksaber, Anita.
the Darksaber, whatever.
Yeah.
The thing is that a really good, and this definitely comes up with the Rise of Skywalker. If like a good Star Wars or a good piece of media from any huge franchise should stand alone.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
To some degree, right? And so like that didn't change the experience for me, whether I like
Sure.
not know. It wasn't like there's this thing I don't know about it. It was just like, cool, you don't even think about it and you're still deeply engaged in the conflict.
Which is great.
100%. And I agree that I agree that
you get that opportunity, right? You can dig in deeper if you want to.
My issue, and so to be clear, like my issue is not even so much it's not even like the show itself bringing the Darksaber in. It's more, and again, this is all like residual just anxiety from the past few years of the quote unquote discourse, is like the ways in which other fans latch on so strongly to those kinds of things, and to them, like, that is what's all that's important are like the objects and like the totems of and like knowing them and their history and like the legacy and the dynasty and like the gatekeeping that happens around that. Like, I'm just so wary of that now, that when I see the Darksaber show up here, it's like where like some years ago I would have been like, oh, that's kind of fun, like they're pulling in this thing from elsewhere. Now I'm like worried because I've seen how other people think about things like that I go in and I tense up and I'm like, oh fuck, is this going to be like the thing that divide, like the true Star Wars fans know what the Darksaber is and its significance. Like, I'm just so tired of that shit that I have this like knee-jerk reaction now when stories introduce opportunities for that kind of, acting around a story and what makes it good or not good, that it's not even about the story itself. And that's not fair to The Mandalorian, like my reaction, but it is based in things that I've seen happen a lot over the past few years.
That's why they hated Last Jedi so much, because it was so much about burning down all that stuff.
Exactly.
Literally and figuratively.
Yes.
Yeah. There's one tiny thing I wanted to point out just in relation to the way women are represented. And like, it's not a thing worth noting, except in the context of a show that just doesn't particularly value women. When Mando and oh my goodness, what's his name? That they're in episode 8, they're stuck in that area.
Grief Karga, the Carl Weathers character? Or?
Yeah.
Carl Weathers.
So they go out to fight the stormtroopers, and Cara just stays back and provides cover. And it's one of those things where I'm like, well, wouldn't she be more capable? Like, she's younger and she's very well, like, the whole show has taught us that she's like very capable and very strong and very together. And it's just another way that I'm like, oh, they like are removing the woman from the action in this particular scene. And again, it's so minor that most of the time I wouldn't bring this kind of thing up, but I think it's worth mentioning in terms of like how repeatedly this happens. And I think that Cara Dune's character is really appealing and really interesting. And I think that Gina Carano, she's not the best actor, like, but she's so appealing.
Yeah,
like she's a very magnetic.
Winning. Yeah, she's super winning.
And I think that she's gonna get better, right? Like she's an MMA fighter. She used to compete. She got into acting. She's learning. And I think that like they I don't know how she got the role, but like giving her this chance, I think that they did good, like by allowing her to be in this role. And so, maybe there was some of that they were trying to like not give her too much, or I'm being too generous here and reading too much into it for sure. But just another example of how I'm like, the show, which again, I don't like when I think of the show as a whole, I'm not like, oh, that was garbage. Mm-hmm. Like I was very engaged with it. Like I was actually traveling and I like went out of my way and used a VPN and like watched episodes while I was on the road because I kind of wanted to see what was next. Like I clearly gave a shit and was engaged even though I have so many criticisms about it. So there's something magnetic about it. And I also am like, oh, cool. What's going to be next? Like what's going to be season 2? So.
There's a way in which the show, this is just another random thought, there's a way in which the show is operated as simply a machine in which Baby Yoda was put into peril and we react to that. You know what I mean? It's just like every single episode, it's like, protect Baby Yoda. Why are you not doing why did you just do that thing that put Baby Yoda into peril? Please stop hitting Baby Yoda. Why are you hitting Baby Yoda? You jerk. I hate you now. Which on the one hand, like my nervous system doesn't like, but on the other hand, from a story point of view, it just really got me, feeling that about Baby Yoda every week.
And there's something interesting about Baby Yoda in the sense that Baby Yoda is not helpless, right? Baby Yoda, like we know that Baby Yoda harbors tremendous power,
incredible power.
And we do see that on occasion. And like apparently Baby Yoda occasionally like misuses his power. Like there's a point at which
force choke Cara.
Yeah, it almost force chokes Cara, and the Mando's like, no, she's a friend. She's a friend. Like this is just a game we're playing or whatever. So Baby Yoda is interesting in that way of being like, yes. Obviously, we're concerned about his well-being and everything, and we want him to be protected. And yet we're also kind of wondering, like, well, what is Baby Yoda capable of? And, like, what is Baby Yoda going to do next with this power that he
What does Moff Gideon want with Baby Yoda?
Yeah, and what is,
And also, like, there is so much, like, what you were talking about, Jonathan, with the, like, he's a young something in training, like, whether it's a Mandalorian or a Jedi or whatever, or all of the above kind of thing. What's interesting is they don't gender Yoda except for, like, once or twice. The whole show, or Baby Yoda, sorry, I should be clear about that, not really Yoda. I remember distinctly Mando calling him he like once, but every other time was very general. Like it was the child or the asset
the kid.
Or the baby. Yeah. So, I suspect that that's not necessarily intentional and that Baby Yoda is going to end up being male with the way that the show is going. But
I think at this point it would be a weird swerve because
it would be so delightful, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but it wouldn't make. They must know because they have to. Do they have to change Baby Yoda's diapers? They must know.
I was just wondering that.
Like what and if anatomy, whatever. Assuming that's all. Yeah, I don't know. This has become a very loaded conversation. Like what
Baby Yoda can choose their own gender.
Exactly.
When they're old enough, okay?
That's sure.
So
that's
another really exciting thing about the end of the show is that, and this is another lore thing that I didn't know ahead of time, and I looked it up, as people were talking about it. We know nothing. We know nothing about Yoda's species, their planet, where they come from, anything about them. So, and we're sort of tantalizingly at the end there given a clue that like in the future of this show potentially Mando is tasked with bringing Baby Yoda back to its people. So that is a thing that might happen where we might finally, after years of sort of George Lucas, jealously guarding the secret, get some clarity about and so I'm not even sure that we know. I mean, I know that you spoke last time with Jessica about, I think it's Yodel and Yodel. Yodel was the other one from the prequels. Is like the female Yoda, but I mean, I wonder if all of that. I wonder if even like the gender stuff, they might even change. Possibly, maybe maybe it's going to be something totally different that we're not even aware of.
There are 17 genders,
right,
of that species,
or something.
Yeah,
cool.
It's pretty. It is pretty. It's pretty exciting, though. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes, as someone who didn't know any of the lore, I was like, how much do we know about the Yoda people?
Nothing.
And so apparently we don't know anything. So now I feel totally caught up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right with everyone else.
Wonderful. All right, y'all. We will be right back with our weekly freakouts.
Hey, FFR listeners. Did you know that if you join our Patreon community, you can get nifty perks like early access, exclusive weekly bonus segments, access to our friendly Discord, and more? That's right, you can get cool stuff and help us keep doing FFR at the same time. What are you waiting for? Go to patreon.com/femfreak.
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Jonathan, you want to get us going?
Yes, TikTok is doing all four of those things to me right now. So TikTok is an app on your phone.
Is it an app? What's an app?
An app. Imagine that. It is a new, and it's not super new, but it's new in the sense of like there aren't a whole lot of new social networks, right? Because we have a few of them, and anytime a new social network tries to exist, Facebook either copies it out of existence or, otherwise finds a way to crush it. But TikTok came from China, and in that way is sort of like more untouchable by, like, Facebook can't buy it in the way that they would, and it's not easily replicable what they're doing. So, TikTok, if you haven't seen it, it's a bit like Vine. So if you remember Vine from back in the day, was owned by Twitter, in that it's like short form videos. Vine, I think, was 6 seconds you could do. TikTok is up to 60. And the real sort of like to me at least, the real kind of deep innovation here is I think like TikTok used to be called Musical.ly, musical.ly. And the music aspect to what TikTok does is, I think, the most important feature. Every single TikTok has, even if it doesn't have music, the audio from every TikTok can be used and remixed into someone else's TikTok. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a little thing that either says the song that is playing, and side note, it is an app from China, and like I think it's like legally, it's very gray, like how they're using all these songs, like actual people's songs on TikTok. Like I'm certainly not getting paid or anything for any of the plays that happen on TikTok. So let's put that aside for now. On every single TikTok, there's a little thing at the bottom that says either the song is playing or it just says like original audio by the user who posted the video. And you can click on that audio and you can use that for your own video. So people go viral just because the audio from their thing is funny or something, and people take it and they do their own things with it. And that's like this really interesting, that's never existed before, this kind of like very fast, remixable audio video thing. It's really like, it's wild. And I don't really know what else to say about it. It's definitely worth, if you haven't, like, if you've heard about it and you have, like, just download it and start watching.
It's a very, It's one of those things like when Snapchat came out and you're like, oh my God, I'm old. I don't know how to use this. TikTok is very similar in that like it's like a meme factory. Like shit goes viral on that so quickly. But also it's hard to find what like you're like, where are the things? What do they mean? And like if you stop looking at TikTok for like a couple of weeks, you're just out of the loop. Like you don't understand what's happening anymore. And my experience with TikTok is I've only seen it a handful of times because I have one particular friend that lives in another continent, and when we're together, we get high, and I watch him scroll through it. Okay. And it's so it's so fascinating. Yeah. And I'm like, what does that mean? Where are you finding these? How? What's your feed? Did you subscribe to these people? I don't understand.
It's very
not
different.
any of that.
It's very different. So they have a thing called the For You page, and so this is what they call it. They call it the For You page. It's not a page. There's nothing a page about it. It's just you're just scrolling. It's just like there's you can toggle two things: who you're following or the For You page. And if you scroll through the For You quote unquote page, it's just you're just seeing things that TikTok thinks that you're gonna like based on like what other people are liking and what other people are watching. When you first log into it, it can actually be very off-putting, and it certainly was for me, because the things that it thinks that you're going to like just off the bat, like that everyone likes, are, the lowest common denominator. It's like pranks and, scantily clad women doing dances and like all this kind of stuff. And you kind of just have to like tell it that you don't. Someone taught me how to do this because Baby Yoda went viral. I wanted to like understand it. So my friend who also went viral on there a while ago was like, no, you have to go through and you tell it that you don't like all that stuff. And you just like, you can downvote it or say that you don't like it or whatever. And eventually you start teaching it what you like. And then on your For You quote unquote page, it'll just start showing you stuff that you like. And it's, I don't know. There's a lot of like, I've curated it now to where like pretty much everything I see are just like teens, like leftist teens making memes about like lefty kind of stuff, which is like super fun. And like other adults on the platform who are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm an adult on TikTok. And like, and like, so you do have to sort of like, it's weird. And I've been posting on it and sort of trying to figure out how it works and stuff, by doing that. And it's a very different, it's a very, very different kind of platform. And I guess the most exciting thing to me about it is that it is a new social network, and I don't think that it can be ruined or bought in the way that Instagram was, or the way that Instagram's copied Snapchat and everything. Like, that's probably not going to happen to TikTok anytime soon.
Although it probably has its own other set of issues being a Chinese company as well, right?
That's very true.
Yeah. All right, cool. Carolyn, what are you freaking out about?
I am freaking out about the film Little Women. So
did you see it?
I did. I went to see it last night, and it is, in my view, it is a magnificent film. Like, just absolutely, like, brimming with life and energy and beauty and like and real ideas. Like, the characters, it really engages with, even though, the characters exist in somewhat of a position of privilege relative to their time, and it acknowledges that. Like, it also acknowledges the ways in which women's opportunities to live their own lives and to make their own money in the world and all these things are so limited. But it's not just like part of what's wonderful about it is that all of its sort of ethical concerns and its, concerns about these larger issues, they don't feel like they're kind of grafted on in some way as like artificial, lessons or whatever. Like it all, at least to me as a viewer, felt very much organic, rooted in their lives and their experiences and their struggles. So it's kind of fascinating and regrettable to wake up this morning to the Oscar nominations, where Little Women is nominated for Best Picture, and Saoirse Ronan is nominated for Best Actress, and Florence Pugh for Best Supporting Actress, and so on. But the filmmaking in this film is masterful. Like, this is a film where you feel the director's stamp. The director is Greta Gerwig. And I mean, everything about this film is distinctive. You have so much, so many scenes of like overlapping dialogue and so many things happening where, a room just feels bustling and alive with energy, for instance, in a way that is so unusual in contemporary, mainstream filmmaking. And that's Greta Gerwig's like vision, and her filmmaking and the lighting in this film is beautifully naturalistic. I mean, it just looks gorgeous to behold, and all these things that really set it apart and set as a film. It's infuriating to wake up today and Todd Phillips is nominated for fucking Joker for Best Director, but Greta Gerwig is not. And there's a really interesting little exchange in Little Women that kind of, in some ways kind of cuts to the heart of a lot of what we do here. So obviously the main character, played by Saoirse Ronan, is a writer. She dreams of being a professional writer. And, she's writing a story about kind of her, an autobiographical story, right, about her and her sisters and things like that, of course. And she's like, but it's not very important. Like our lives, our little dealings, our lives are not very important. And one of her sisters says, well, but by writing about it, you make it more important. And Joe, the Saoirse Ronan character, is like, no, writing reflects importance. It doesn't confer it or bestow it. And the other sister's like, no, like when the story is told, like it makes that matter more. And it's just this interesting moment, this kind of interesting acknowledgement of how the stories we tell matter and representation matters and all of that in this sort of philosophical little moment that happens in the film. And anyway, and Timothée Chalamet, just, so good in this as in just about everything I've seen him in. And anyway, truly, like I walked out of this film just feeling so alive and just so good. It's really a wonderful film, in my opinion.
Nice. I cannot wait to see it.
Me neither.
All right. I am freaking out about a book called The Shining Girls by Lauren Buekes. So Lauren is a friend of mine who lives in South Africa, and like I've been there twice, and every year I go there, she gives me another one of her books. So I basically read a book of hers a year at this point. I was familiar with her work before we met. I had read her book Moxyland. And then last year I read Zoo City, which I don't remember if I talked about in this podcast, which is very good. And so this year I read The Shining Girls. Now, Lauren is a prolific creative writer, and I can't really categorize her writing because some of it is like dystopian future, some of it is thriller. She's written for animation and comics and games as well as being a novelist. So The Shining Girls is about. It takes place in Chicago, and there is a guy who finds a key to a house that opens to other times, and he is a serial killer. So he goes and murders women across time, and becomes obsessed with these women. And they're called the Shining Girls because he wants he only kills women that have the shine, that like he sees the shining. It's really intense. And because Lauren's work is rooted in feminism, it's not just like, this because it is partly from his perspective, but you really get into all of these women. Like you see from their perspectives and their lives and their experiences. And the crux of the story is that one of his victims actually survives. And so she is determined to hunt him down and figure out who her murderer is. Oh, wow. And so you see kind of both of these perspectives, as well as the perspectives of people in the orbit of these characters as well. And it's quite it's very intense and gruesome, but also pretty smart, especially dealing with a book around, extreme violence against women. So yeah, that is my freak out this week. We also have a guest freak out by Halex Pereira.
Hey, Feminist Frequency. This is Alex Pereira from Brazil. I am freaking out about the 2 books by Angela Saini. They are called Inferior and Superior. Those books are not fiction, unfortunately. They talk about how women have been victims of prejudice in medicine and biology. That is the Inferior book. And in Superior, Saini tackles racism in science. It's a great read, and as a biologist myself, I think we must try as hard as we can to avoid our biases to influence our work. Freak out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for contributing that. If you want to submit your own freak out, you can do that at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the Freakin' After Party, which is only available to backers of this podcast. You can learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. Jonathan, thank you so much for being a guest. Would you stay on and hang out for our bonus?
Yeah, let's freaking freak out.
Let's freak out. Let's party freak or freaking party.
Freaking
whatever.
party.
Freaking party. Where can folks find you if they want to find your songs or learn more about what you've been up to?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. I'm at Song a Day Man, and you can find my new podcast actually at podcast.com. Podcast.com. No, that's wrong. Podcast.
I was like, damn, how did you get podcast.com? That's
you're
impressive.
Doing good. No. Podcast.jonathanmann.net is where that's at.
Awesome. What is it about?
I'm doing a podcast where it's called As It Happens, and it's sort of real-time songwriting. So you hear me write a song from the beginning to end, and it's like it's mostly about kind of the messy process of creation. It's sort of like, there's a little bit of nitty-gritty like songwriting stuff in there, but it's mostly about like me being interrupted while I'm writing a song and like failing and messing up and and it's just like it's sort of like my ongoing quest to sort of uncover the sort of mystery of like creating things is not a straight line. It's a weavy, windy, every which way thing, and that's sort of what the podcast is, in under 20 minutes or less every week.
Amazing. That actually sounds really cool. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about your Baby Yoda video without you, and that you wrote a song in my house once, and watching you do that was fascinating. So
cool.
This podcast...
that's exactly right. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I was just like watching that process I was just like, holy shit, it's like... it's quite incredible, and I think it's very different than a lot of other creative ventures. So I have not listened to it yet, but I'm going to listen to your podcast because it sounds great.
Thanks, Anita.
All right, you can find us everywhere great podcasts are found. And if you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social medias at FemFreak. Although I think our YouTube channel is actually Feminist Frequency written full, but whatever, it's easier to just say FemFreak. You can figure it out. This show is engineered by Rob Pereira. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Join us next week for another feminist dive into pop culture. Bye.
Later.
See ya.